Hey, hi everyone. So we talked about intelligent activities. I sort of regraphed this here, right? So intelligent activities. All right, let's start with brute reflexes. So brute reflexes come from the behaviorist tradition, and the idea is like, brute reflexes, you don't really have to compute anything. There's no intervening stages or states that go into figuring out that you need to move, right? You don't have to think about moving your leg when you get hit with a, hammer, right? Your knee gets hit with a hammer. But they're encapsulated, so they're super efficient in the sense that these reflexes, right? They don't take information from anywhere else except for, the external stimuli. So in that sense, it's informationally encapsulated, which allows it to be more efficient. This is why you don't have to think about whether your hand is burning when you have it on a stove, right? It's very, very efficient, and that's because it's not really taking in information from anything else except for the external stimulus and maybe the nerves, right? Of course, the nerves. Um, but we know that there are intelligent activities like that aren't just simple reflexes, uh, and you know that are computational, and we have to think about it quite a bit. There and the output is more complex than the input, but these intelligent activities are not encapsulated, so they don't, or yeah, they're not encapsulated, meaning that we take information in from other things, right? Other background beliefs, top-down knowledge, whatever. Um, and so cognitive reflexes are more like the middle ground, right? They're more efficient because they don't have to take in information from other sources, but they're computational because, yeah. So they still you still have to do they still manipulate information in a complicated way, but they don't take information from other things. And these cognitive reflexes are thought to be modular, right? That's the idea, is that they're modular. And so here's like sort of a symbolic representation of the mind we can think of. And so the idea here is that there's this, like, so right here, this is what we call the transducers, right? This little black outline. And these transducers convert raw data into information that can be used for computation. So for example, if vision is what we're talking about, the eye takes in that information, the light hits the retina, and whatever the transducer is, the transducer uh takes that raw information or distribution of light and converts it into neural signals. Okay. And then, so yeah, the neural signals go through the optic nerve. That neural activity goes to the brain, and the brain does something with that information. And what they do, the idea is that that information goes into the transduced information goes into input or output and input output systems, and transforms those representations into distal stimuli, so representations of whatever stimulus we're looking at. So if these are like, so this whole thing right here is like a module, okay? Let's imagine it's the visual module, okay? And within this module, there are like little modular subsystems. Okay, so let's say the A is like edge detector. So this module will detect edges. It'll take that transduced information and use it to detect edges. And then once the edges are detected, it'll spit that output out into module B or submodule B. And let's say the submodule B is like the shape identifier, right? So edge detector and the output from the edge detector is then the input for the shape identifier. And then once submodule B does its job, it spits that information as output. It outputs that information, and that information about the shape goes and is used as input into submodule C, which we'll say is the object identifier. And so these are like small specialized submodules, and that they only do one thing. Now, the other thing I want to mention is that these are also hierarchical. So like, A submodule A detects edges, and then it spits out that information to the shape identifier submodule. which goes to the object identifier module. Sorry, but the point is that if, say, the edge detector submodule is broken or something, or stops working, functioning, then you can't really identify the shape, and then you can't really uh, identify the object because there's no input for submodules B and C. Whereas if the edge detector submodule is broken or not broken, sorry, uh, and neither is the shape identifier, but the object identifier is, you could still probably identify the shape, but maybe you couldn't recognize what the object was. Okay. And so these output systems are essentially modulars with, or modules, I'm sorry, modules with a number of nested submodules inside of them. Inside each module, once each module is finished doing its specific job, the outputs are sent to a central processing system that integrates this information and may use it to update beliefs or um, store output and maybe modify a knowledge structure. It could also be used for intelligent action, whatever that behavior may be. Okay. And so I talked about this before. This is a cool picture here I got from ChatGPT. So the question is, do cognitive systems function from functionally independent and specialized modules, or do cognitive functions emerge from the interactions among a network of interconnected units? Yeah, so the idea behind modularity is that the mind is composed of separate and specialized processes or components that are informationally encapsulated. So like here, these are like, obviously there's no uh there aren't like little people in cubicles in our mind, right? This is just a representation of to get the idea across. So if you imagine each of these people are like very specialized employers, they can only do like one thing, right? They're just one trick ponies and they do their thing over and over again. But they don't listen to anybody else that they don't have to. They might listen to like a submodule that like inputs that information, right? Inputs the output of that submodule into that submodule. So for example, if this is edge detection, right? Well, okay, edge detection spits out that information up to the shape identifier module, and then spits that information up to the object identifier module, let's say. Then, right, this would be, in a sense, not as informationally encapsulated, but the point is that it doesn't take as much. It takes minimal information. It only takes the input that it needs to, and nothing else, right? It doesn't recruit from other kinds of modules. And so, like if we use the picture naming as a task, like so if I see a picture of a dog and I have to just say dog, that it's a dog, right? That's it. In this case, you might say there's a separate process or component in the mind that only processes the semantic information associated with the picture. Maybe there's a separate component or module for selecting the word, the correct word, dog, and then a separate component for selecting phonemes or the constituent sounds. The important thing, though, is that it's assumed that none of these modules communicate or help each other out in any other way aside from maybe giving them the input, right? Each module is responsible for its own product, and once it's finished, only once it's finished does it relay this information. Now, in contrast, right, interactivity means that the components would be highly interconnected and communicate or influence each other. So different components would collaborate in producing complex behavior. So in this example, right, again, there's no like meeting in your head with a bunch of people, but you can imagine if it were interactive, you would think that each one of these people, rather than being super specialized and can only do like one thing, they're kind of generalists and they have some familiarity with everybody's job to some extent. And so when there's some sort of cognitive function, these like components communicate with each other and sort of help each other and collaborate in producing some output. Okay. Last thing I wanted to say was that one thing that people I think will probably get confused by I don't want people to think that modularity is the same as localization. It's not. So localization is when like a certain part of the brain is very specifically lit up or involved in a particular function, right? So here's an example of phrenology. It's a related pseudoscience, right? So all pseudosciences are usually related to real sciences, and they have an ounce of truth, right? So there is localization in the brain, uh, but it's not the way that they think. So, like, back in the day, for context, if you've seen Django Unchained, right? Leo talks about like a big lump in the back of his slave's head. He's a slave owner in the movie, and how that's the bigger it is, the more submissive they are, right? So the point is that there's like they think that there are certain parts of the brain that are responsible for really high order constructs, right? Like secretiveness, submissiveness, secretness, benevolence, spirituality, conscientiousness, right? There are certainly localized, there is some localization, but they're not like these higher level constructs. They're more lower level. So, for example, there's the face fusiform area. This is a part of the brain. I forget where it is, but it's part of the brain that like if you put it under an fMRI, if you put up somebody under an fMRI, and then show them a picture of a face, this part of the brain will light up, and it's a very specific part of the brain. So it suggests that maybe it's responsible for a lot. It's doing a lot of the heavy lifting in face processing. And then Wernicke's area is another area. I think that's like around here. If this was a real brain, right? And it's responsible primarily for speech comprehension. If you get brain damage to Wernicke's area, what you'll find is that the person would, if somebody did get brain damage to Wernicke's area, what you'd find is that they would talk, they could speak and produce language, but they wouldn't make any sense. They would just be speaking in word salad, basically. Uh, so their comprehension's messed up, but their production's okay. Whereas if you get Broca's area is like I think a little bit farther to in the front. Uh, Broca's area is responsible for speech production. So if you get damage to Broca's area, then you tend to have trouble producing speech, but you can usually comprehend what people are saying. You just have trouble actually um, speaking. And the important thing is that although these things may be modular, right? Like whatever face processing might be modular, right? Speech comprehension and speech production might be modular. Uh, that's just besides the point. The point is that localization is not the same thing as modular. Localization has to do with the brain and where things are being done in the brain, and it's on the implementational level of Mars level. But modular refers to something more abstract, and it's talking about the mind and the function of the mind. Now, I want to say it does localization and modularity do seem like they're probably related, right? Intuitively, at least. You would think that if there's some function that seems localized based on fMRI scans, you would think maybe it's a little modular, but they don't have to be. And the point is that they're not necessarily, and that's not even what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about localization. So, okay, next videos, we're going to keep going with this modularity stuff.